A mysterious extraterrestrial species has arrived on Earth, beginning to infect humans everywhere. Infected individuals won't lose their lives, even if their heads are separated from their bodies. Their bodies will undergo mutation, completely transforming into alien monsters. Several children returning home for summer vacation are accidentally caught up in this survival crisis. What is the true purpose of this extraterrestrial species? Welcome to the latest sci-fi blockbuster, Goosebumps, Brooklyn, 1994. Four young people ventured into a tunnel for exploration. It was said that this was a place for wartime human experiments. They planned to spend the night here for a daring adventure. Just as they were surveying their surroundings, a loud noise suddenly came from behind a cabinet. It turned out to be Maddie's brother, Anthony, who had followed them. Maddie hurried over to shoo his brother away, to prevent their mother from finding out they were both out. Soon, the four saw an electrified device that sparked along with a machine ahead. A circular platform rose from the ground. The four walked over to inspect it. It spewed a cloud of black powder. "30 years passed. The disappearance of those adventurous kids became an urban legend. One day, twins CeCe and Devin arrived in Brooklyn from downtown New York. They were looking to spend the summer with their divorced dad. Their father was the Anthony from back then. He had now become a botanist. When the family arrived at their home, they found that their neighbor Strick had blocked their driveway.
Your mom always let me park there though, so like...
That's because my mom didn't have a car, so you weren't blocking anything. And she has dementia.
Strick verbally promised to move his car, but in reality, he took no action. The three of them complained as they entered the house. The living room was cluttered with many boxes, because recently Anthony sent his elderly mother with dementia to a nursing home. For many years, the twins had lived with their mother, so they weren't very close to their dad. But Anthony was full of confidence about this summer vacation. He even created a handbook of rules. The most important rule was that they weren't allowed to enter the basement without permission. This wasn't for any other reason, but because Anthony first took the two inside for a quick tour. It turned out the basement housed a lot of his research. Anthony believed he might discover a new type of all-purpose plant. The things here were related to work. That's why he prohibits twins from entering the basement. After putting away their luggage, the family of three went to a nearby restaurant for a meal. While discussing the recent situations of the two children, CeCe was an exemplary student. Even during the summer, she attended debate camp in the city every week to enhance her resume for applying to prestigious colleges. So Anthony prepared her a stun gun in case she encountered any bad people on her commute. But Devin would make people worry. He had recently been suspended for fighting with someone. Although it was the other person's fault, Devin had a fiery temper. After finishing their meal, the three prepared to leave. They ran into the restaurant owner's son Dino. He had been delivering takeout during the summer to earn some extra cash. Dino was friendly and outgoing. He invited the twins to the park tomorrow, and several young people from the town would come over. CeCe and Devin casually agreed to join.
What? Did he just eat an egg roll out of that delivery bag?
As Anthony returned home, he encountered the local police officer Jenny. She kindly warned Anthony that Strick's dad Joe had come to the station today to file a harassment complaint for his son. "You'd better be careful." Anthony felt speechless upon hearing this. How could this family turn things around on him? He thanked Jenny and prepared to go back inside. Jenny handed him an evidence bag, which contained the clothes Maddie wore the night he died. Since the case was already closed, the station felt it was better to return the belongings to the family. Anthony didn't want to bring up his brother's death. He casually placed the clothes in the basement. The next day, he got up to make pancakes, but every single one ended up burnt. CeCe made an excuse to skip breakfast, saying she needed to go to the drugstore to buy lead-free body wash. Devin insisted on going with her.
I'll save them. Okay, I'll save them. I'm not gonna save them.
Once Devin arrived at the drugstore, he seemed very excited. This was because he was looking forward to seeing his childhood friend, Frankie, at the park party. Although the last time they met was in 8th grade, Devin felt there was still a connection between them.
Word of advice, don't overuse the word bussin' around her. Okay, nobody says it anymore.
As soon as she finished speaking, a curly-haired girl tried to come in to buy some pain relievers. However, she was met with a harsh dismissal by the clerk. The curly-haired girl felt she was being discriminated against. She pulled out her phone to go live, to expose the clerk's rude behavior. But she noticed CeCe in the background, who took advantage of the chaos to steal a lip gloss. The curly-haired girl happened to capture this on her stream. She seemed to think of something, put away her phone and left. From the clerk's comments, it turned out that the curly-haired girl was a juvenile delinquent. Shortly after, the two arrived at the park. To their surprise, Frankie was indeed there. The moment Devin saw her, he became tongue-tied.
Didn't know you guys were here.
Yeah, we're here. Yeah, we're here. I'm here. They're here.
Resulting in a painfully awkward introduction. CeCe intentionally pulled Dino away to give the two some alone time. Unfortunately, things didn't go as hoped. Frankie already had a boyfriend, and this person was none other than Strick. Strick noticed Devin's interest in Frankie and mocked him in a sarcastic manner. CeCe was unaware that her brother was being humiliated and was about to take out her lip gloss to touch up when the curly-haired girl snatched it away.
My mom says you're not supposed to share makeup, you know, germs.
Yeah, my mom says you're not supposed to steal, laws.
It seemed that the siblings' gathering wasn't going well. They were discussing leaving together when Dino pulled them into the crowd and urged them to talk about their Uncle Matty's disappearance. Local kids were basically raised on this scary story and were very afraid to go near the tunnel. Devin deliberately put on a fearless look, but Strick couldn't stand his pretentious act and suggested they test it out tonight. Devin agreed, not wanting to embarrass himself in front of the girls. In the evening, they arrived at the scene of the incident. Strick took out a pair of bolt cutters he had in his car and cut through the chains to let them inside. Various security systems were installed here, so the lights stayed on even when no one was around, to prevent any children from getting into danger. Once they reached the tunnel entrance, they hesitated to go further. Strick handed Devin a flashlight and urged him to enter the tunnel alone. CeCe was worried and urged Devin not to show off, but with things having progressed this far, backing out now would only make him a laughingstock. Devin stepped into the tunnel, and Frankie was surprised by his bravery and couldn't help but admire him. Strick became even angrier as he secretly sabotaged the main power box. The lights on Devin's side went out immediately. The equipment ahead sparked to life just like it had 30 years ago. The circular passageway appeared once again. Devin leaned in to take a look and saw Matty's face. In the next moment, black powder burst out. After inhaling it, his eyes began to ooze black liquid. Devin rushed back toward the tunnel entrance. Fortunately, CeCe rushed in just in time to help Devin out of the tunnel. He didn't suffer any lasting effects, but he lost all memories of what happened after entering the tunnel. CeCe warned him not to do such foolish things again. Just as the two were arguing, Anthony walked over. He explained that Grandma's condition had worsened last night. You both should go to the nursing home. But CeCe didn't want to miss the first day of debate camp, so in the end, only Devin could go with their dad. The nurse at the nursing home informed them that the elderly lady had been asking to see her eldest son since midnight yesterday. For all these years, she had never accepted Matty's death. Even though the police believed the missing person had drowned, Anthony comforted his mother and had Devin come over to keep her company. He then went to talk with the doctor. However, Devin was a bit afraid of Grandma.
Matty! You smell like Matty.
I'm Devin.
You smell like Matty.
The nurse came just in time to take the elderly lady away. By the time the father and son returned home, it was already dark. Anthony asked Devin to order some takeout, while he went to the basement to stay for a while. His mother's condition made him feel conflicted inside. Finally, Anthony mustered the courage to open the evidence bag. He discovered some strange powder on his brother's clothes. Anthony quickly took a sample for examination. Meanwhile, Devin found an old photo album. Seeing Matty's photo triggered some memories for him. Devin was convinced he had seen that face in the tunnel. He hurriedly knocked on his father's door. As he got closer, the spore-like samples reacted violently. Anthony told Devin to wait a moment and continue observing the sample's reaction. At this moment, a nearby plant slowly began to crawl toward the petri dish. Anthony reached out to cover it up, but unexpectedly, his entire arm was ensnared by vines. He was pulled toward the door. Devin seemed to be affected by the vines and suddenly had a splitting headache. He covered his head and rushed out of the house. Anthony was also dragged toward the drainage pipe. The vines followed the pipe and wrapped around Devin on the street, pulling him into the drainage system. In a moment of crisis, Devin grabbed a nearby metal pipe and smashed open the iron gate, severing the vines. The roots instantly retracted and vanished from Anthony's palm. When Devin crawled out of the drainage, he lost his memories from earlier. Meanwhile, Anthony discovered that there were many red veins appearing from his palm to his forearm. After urgently attending to it, Anthony fainted until a tiny root emerged from the bandage, constantly poking at Anthony. When he woke up and saw it, he was startled. Anthony quickly tore off the bandage on his arm, and found that his arm was covered in tiny vines. They wriggled like nematodes. Anthony turned on his camera to document his findings. He speculated that the powder might be spores of some kind of plant, and that it had gene recombining properties. Just like pea tendrils, it could bond with a host.
Holy crap! There's something in my arm! There's something in my arm!
Anthony quickly grabbed a scalpel and made an incision on the bulge. Then he used a small gardening rake to dig out the substance underneath and covered it with glass. He sent the experimental data to the lab in the city for analysis.
Because I think it might be related to what happened to my brother Matty. The police report said that they died skinny dipping, jumping off the seawall, but I was there that night. That tunnel was the only way in or out. No one left the room that night.
Anthony had always been puzzled about the reason for his brother's disappearance. However, the spores left on the hoodie made him feel like he had caught a lead. The test results were shocking. The substance wasn't a plant, but a carnivorous creature. Frankie was very unhappy with Strick's act of damaging the power box, along with various unpleasant events that had occurred recently. She was determined to break up with him. However, upon learning of this, Strick immediately refused and instead blamed Frankie. This tactic had worked for him many times before, but this time, Frankie didn't back down. She left Joe's auto repair shop to help open the coffee shop where she worked. To her surprise, the first customers were the twins. Anyone could see that Devin was very happy. CeCe left first, and Frankie apologized for what had happened earlier. She explained that she had broken up with Strick to punish his irrational behavior. Devin was overjoyed to hear about their breakup. When Strick approached with a stuffed toy, hoping to make up with Frankie, he saw her hugging Devin. Strick angrily threw the toy away. This matter wouldn't end here. When Devin returned home, he saw his father hurriedly leaving the basement and saying he was going to the pet store. Devin didn't mention his experiences from the night before, but the recent frequent memory lapses worried him. He could only call CeCe to vent his frustrations. He told her that he had researched the symptoms of dementia, things like mental confusion and short-term memory loss. He matched every single one. This was a classic case of internet diagnosis leading to cancer paranoia. CeCe advised him not to scare himself. Devin had to confess what happened last night. As CeCe was about to suggest that Devin talk to his dad, someone suddenly knocked on the door. Devin hung up the phone and went to open the door, only to find Strick at the door, looking for trouble. Strick's attitude of treating Frankie like a possession infuriated Devin.
She's not your girl. Or your property, you provincial loser.
As soon as those words left Strick's mouth, Devin was hit with a punch, but he tackled Strick in retaliation. At a crucial moment, Frankie rushed over to separate them.
Stay away from her, alright?
What, you're gonna give me a green neck with your fake-ass silver chain?
Devin couldn't understand how Frankie could be involved with someone like him. The reason was quite simple. Frankie was born into a single-parent family. Her mother worked day and night to make ends meet, and didn't have enough money to send her to college. For Frankie, marrying someone like Strick was her way out. After hearing this, Devin glanced back, and inadvertently noticed the drainage pipe. He suddenly remembered that he had been dragged in by many vines that night. In the afternoon, Anthony returned from the pet store. Strick had once again taken his parking spot. This time, Anthony didn't waste any words, and immediately grabbed a shovel to smash Strick's car window. If Strick didn't move his car quickly, the other window would be next. Strick rushed over to move his car, determined to make this family pay for it. Anthony ignored him, and held the mouse he had bought from the pet store. He attempted to feed it to the unidentified creature. Unexpectedly, the creature actually opened its bud. In one gulp, it swallowed the entire mouse, leaving not even a bone fragment behind. Fully equipped, Anthony carefully placed it into the freezer. It seemed that just feeding it mice wasn't enough. Anthony went out to buy new feed, and happened to run into his son coming home.
What do you think they do with the dogs they put down at the pound? I just need some meat, like a lot of meat.
Have you tried the butcher?
Anthony drove to the butcher to buy some meat. Dino handed a burrito to Anthony, but Anthony said, "It's all yours. I ordered the food to ask you for a favor." It turned out that Devin planned to go back to the drainage system, but he was worried about losing his memory again, so he wanted Dino to accompany him inside. Returning to the site would help jog his memory. However, the vines had vanished. Devin reached into the sewage to search around.
You do realize that that's all the toilet water from Gravesend. Like you're sticking your hands into the waste of 1,000 flushes.
And quickly grabbed a vine. Dino remarked. "Isn't your dad a botanist? Why not ask him what this really is?" But Devon didn't want to tell his father about it. While the two of them were in the drainage system, Strick quietly approached Devon's house. He was planning to cause some damage to vent his frustration. Frankie understood Stryker's personality and rushed over to stop him, but Strick was determined to teach Anthony a lesson this time. Frankie didn't want to cause trouble, so she had to leave first. Meanwhile, Strick jumped into the basement through the window. He surveyed the plants on the shelves and complained that this family was really weird. Strick deliberately smashed the plants and pulled down an entire shelf. Only then did he feel a sense of relief. He stood in front of the freezer, capturing his masterpiece on camera. Suddenly, the freezer door opened.
Oh, that's not good.
Frankie, unable to shake her worries, came over shortly to check on things. She called out for a long time, but no one answered. She crawled into the basement to look for someone. Unexpectedly, the window slammed shut with a bang, and it wouldn't open at all. Frankie tried to call Strick, but discovered his phone was lying beside the freezer. She thought about leaving through the front door, but it was locked, and no one was answering outside. Suddenly, a noise came from behind the shelves. Frankie thought it was a prank by Stryker. She hurried over to check. Unexpectedly, a hand tapped her shoulder. In the dim light, a figure emerged from behind the shelves. It was actually a bloody monster. Frankie screamed in terror. Her voice echoed down into the basement. Hearing this, Dino refused to stay any longer and urgently called for Devon to return to the surface. He warned, "Don't even think about asking for my help again. Who goes into the drainage system to rummage around?" Devon, reeking, just wanted to take a shower quickly. As soon as he opened the door, he collided head-on with the creature. Devon was sent flying. After a moment, he got back up and hurried to chase after Frankie. A short while later, Anthony returned from the butcher carrying a leg of lamb. He immediately noticed the basement door was open. Upon entering, he found the place in disarray. At this moment, a call came in from a friend in the city. They instructed Anthony to send that thing over and never let unknown species enter the ecosystem. Anthony opened the fridge. The new species inside had long since vanished. Next to it was a set of clothes with Strick's name embroidered on them. Meanwhile, Frankie, regaining consciousness, found herself at Joe's auto repair shop. The creature tugged at the silver chain around its neck and rasped an explanation. Only then did Frankie realize the creature was Strick. He shoved a tool into Frankie's hands and asked her to help scrape off the unknown substance on him. However, this method proved ineffective. At this moment, Devon also arrived. Strick was still resentful over Devon taking his girlfriend, so he went into a rage mode. It looked like he was about to kill Devon. Frankie quickly removed the suspended car and smashed Strick into a puddle of slime. Frankie grabbed the silver chain and hurriedly left the scene with Devon. Meanwhile, the black slime suddenly began to stir and slithered into Strick's car. The glass that Anthony had shattered instantly restored itself to its original state. Officer Jenny saw a curly-haired girl performing community service by the roadside. From their conversation, it turned out they were mother and daughter. Why did a police officer's daughter end up in a juvenile prison? Everything goes back to a year ago. Her name was Helen. Helen's teenage years were quite rebellious. One day, she got a bunch of firecrackers from somewhere and was discovered by her friend Colin. He started setting off fireworks inside an abandoned building. Helen knew it was dangerous to light them indoors and urged Colin to stop immediately, but he insisted on betting with others, tying firecrackers to their hands. Then he lit the fuse to see who could hold on the longest. The boy who was pulled over quickly dismantled the firecracker on his hand. Colin panicked as well. The more anxious he got, the harder it was to remove the tape. Helen rushed forward to help. In a flurry, Colin threw the firecrackers away. Unfortunately, the fire spread quickly along the curtains throughout the building. Helen, who stayed behind to put out the fire, was caught red-handed. She couldn't clear the suspicion and didn't want to betray her friend, so Helen was taken to juvenile detention. This deeply disappointed her mother, Jenny. Helen had recently been released on probation. However, during her probation, she was required to wear an electronic ankle monitor and couldn't leave the designated area. There was also a strict curfew at 10 in the evening. Once she violates the rules, she must return to prison immediately. Anthony was cleaning up the messy basement. He asked his son, who had just come downstairs, if he had seen Strick. Devon felt a bit guilty and said he wasn't familiar with Strick. Anthony thought his son was acting a bit strange, and asked his daughter if she knew how Devon had been doing lately. CeCe could only tell her father about Devon's frequent amnesia and one day falling into the sewer. Anthony's first reaction was to ask Devon if he had gone into the basement. CeCe was very disappointed. She felt that her father cared more about the plants in the basement than about her brother. Anthony couldn't tell CeCe the truth. At the same time, Devon and Frankie discussed and decided to check out their father's basement, because Strick had mutated in there, and Devon had also been dragged into the drainage system by the plants. The recent strange occurrences were likely related to the basement. Anthony called in Officer Jenny, claiming that Strick had trespassed and stolen his research. Jenny took Anthony to Joe's house to ask questions, only to find out that Strick wasn't home. The broken car window had mysteriously repaired itself. Joe immediately called his son. To his surprise, it went straight to voicemail. He had to contact Frankie, but she said she hadn't seen Strick since yesterday. Joe instructed his staff to move the car, and went out to look for Strick. Coincidentally, Helen was wandering nearby. She wanted to find Colin to talk, but she was struggling without a means of transportation. At this moment, she saw an employee moving cars, sticking the keys under the sun visor. Helen took Strick's car and drove away, completely unaware of anything unusual about the car. Not long after driving off, she ran into CeCe, using the stolen footage as leverage. She forced CeCe to bring Colin out from his workplace. However, CeCe was a straight-A student. She found the reporting number for the juvenile detention center. If a probationary offender committed a crime, such as stealing a car, they would be sent back to prison. But CeCe wasn't a bad person. She gave Helen a chance to explain. Helen had to tell CeCe about last year's incident, and explain that Colin was too afraid to meet her, so he had to ask CeCe to go and talk to her.
Okay, so your plan is to try to get him to confess?
Yeah,
I mean, why? You already served the time.
I don't want my mom to think I'm a loser criminal.
CeCe accepted this explanation. She had just gotten out of the car to look for Colin, when the car stereo suddenly blared loudly. No matter how Helen tried to adjust it, she couldn't turn it off. Soon after, other buttons began to malfunction as well. Fortunately, CeCe quickly returned. The car immediately returned to normal. She managed to get Colin's address, and the two of them headed to that location to wait for him. Sure enough, they spotted Colin just as he was leaving. Helen stopped him, saying she wanted to talk. Colin got on his bike and ran away. Helen jumped into the car to chase him. CeCe quickly urged her. It's not worth breaking the law for someone like him. Only then did Helen calm down and ease off the accelerator. Unexpectedly, a sticky substance stuck to the soles of her shoes. The car sped toward Colin uncontrollably. CeCe couldn't believe Helen's explanation at all. She grabbed the steering wheel and crashed into a roadside pillar to stop the car. A spore-like powder sprayed out from the radiator and slipped into CeCe's cup.
I can't believe I fell for it. The innocent routine, you are screwed up.
CeCe got out of the car and walked away, leaving her cup behind in the vehicle. Helen was feeling frustrated due to the car malfunction. Unexpectedly, in the next moment, the deflated car returned to normal. It even locked its doors and windows by itself. Helen couldn't react, and dropped her phone out of the window. By the time she realized what was happening, the car had sped out onto the street. The police quickly received the report, and arrived at the accident scene. According to eyewitness accounts, the vehicle involved was Strick's Oldsmobile, but the problem was, apart from the bent pillar, there were no signs of an accident at all. The windows weren't broken, and there was no paint left on the pillar. Moreover, with the damage like that, the car couldn't possibly have driven away. Jenny wanted to ask her daughter about Strick's situation, but she discovered that Helen's phone was at the accident scene. At this moment, the Oldsmobile was racing down the road with Helen inside. Colin was unaware of the specifics. He drove up to take revenge. As he got closer, he realized the car was on autopilot. Colin was startled. He was pushed to the roadside by the Oldsmobile. Helen realized the car was heading straight for the ocean. She quickly crawled into the trunk and used cutters to open the car door. Jumping out, the car then plunged directly into the water. It vanished into a mass of bubbles. Jenny soon found her daughter by the roadside. She hurried to get her home before curfew. Meanwhile, a few hours earlier, Anthony had been taken to the police station by Jenny to give a statement. He had vented his frustration randomly. Anthony felt like a victim, and questioned why he had to undergo an investigation. The two of them parted ways unhappily. On his way home, Anthony suddenly recalled what CeCe had said, so he decided to check out the drainage system. At this moment, Devon and Frankie were in the basement. They quickly hid in the shadows when they saw Anthony return. Anthony placed a vine on the table, Both father and son had the courage to handle sewage with their bare hands. Anthony had a habit of recording videos, which made it convenient for them to eavesdrop. He mentioned extracting organic material from the hoodie, which could generate freely moving vines. Now, Anthony was going to take samples from the plants in the drainage system. He cut an opening and squeezed the thick black liquid into a petri dish. Unexpectedly, this sticky substance began to gather in a certain direction. It was just like a compass. Anthony followed the direction to the tunnel, where his brother had the accident. The liquid in the petri dish finally settled down. Anthony used his flashlight to survey the surroundings. To his surprise, he discovered Strick completely naked. Anthony quickly helped him into the car. Then he informed Jenny about the situation. Helen accidentally overheard her mother on the phone. She left CeCe's cup in the kitchen. CeCe had lived her life as a model student since childhood. She excelled in both academics and character, and was even more perfect when compared to her underachieving twins. Her friend circle was filled with high achievers as well. No one was slacking off this summer. Some were going to intern on Wall Street, while others were participating in young writers programs. With their grades, they could get into any college they wanted. CeCe also signed up for the most prestigious debate summer camp in the country. She was confident about her selection this time, because CeCe had never failed before, let alone that she had won the state championship. Unexpectedly, the teacher announced her failure, and comforted her by saying it was just a single rejection. CeCe tried to maintain her composure and quickly left the classroom. Most people couldn't understand what failure meant to CeCe. She was seen as the perfect model student in everyone's eyes. Her parents and teachers had high expectations for her. CeCe didn't want to confess to her mother, so she lied that she had been selected. Every day, she took the subway and pretended to attend the debate camp. No one saw through her lies.
You're gonna nail it, CeCe. You nail everything.
Yep, it's kind of my whole thing.
CeCe finished packing and was ready to head out. Helen ran after her to explain what happened yesterday, but it was hard for most people to believe that cars weren't under control. Helpless, Helen had to return the cup to her first. CeCe went to the cafe to get a cup of kombucha to go. She relied on this tea to relieve her stress. As she entered, she ran into a classmate from New York. Everyone was curious about how the debate competition was going. CeCe could only lie, saying she was temporarily in first place. The others began discussing their recent updates. Uni was interning at a data lab at Columbia. Abel would submit his memoir next weekend, and strove to publish it next year. CeCe felt overwhelmed with pressure. She took the kombucha and drank it all in one go. CeCe even swallowed all the spores inside. She arranged to meet with an honorary alum from Brown University. If all went well, she could secure her admission spot early. With her impeccable grades, and with her mother being the famous Tory, the interview could have gone smoothly, but that cup of tea made her hiccup uncontrollably. Before long, she started to have a nosebleed. CeCe felt a sharp pain in her head. In a daze, she realized she had left the building. When she woke up, she found herself at home in New York. She had also vomited a large puddle of black liquid. Devin and Frankie were at the hospital visiting Strick. Although they had found him, he was no better than a vegetable state.
I mean, I thought I killed him. Yeah, I mean, you did, but you didn't. You killed something.
Yeah.
Before long, Anthony also came to visit Strick. He had informed Officer Jenny about the organic material on the hoodie. He believed that the organic material had attacked Strick. The two intended to find out more about the situation, but the doctor said Strick was suffering from traumatic mutism. He couldn't speak or write for a while. After the doctor finished speaking, he left the ward and tossed his white coat into the trash can.
Excuse me, I got turned around. Do you know where the ICU is?
Sorry, I don't work here.
As Anthony was leaving the hospital, he noticed that the substance in the petri dish reacted to the fake doctor. Soon after, feeling guilty about stealing a car, Helen also arrived at the hospital to see Strick. She ran into Devin and the other person in the rest area. Helen casually revealed that she had driven Strick's car yesterday. Frankie was about to ask more questions when CeCe suddenly called Devin. She confessed about her failure to get into the debate camp. Then she told Devin about what had just happened. CeCe had no memories of returning home at all. This was strikingly similar to her brother's previous situation, so Devin told her to stay put. "I'll be right there," he said. CeCe calmed herself and went to the restroom to rinse her mouth. The substance she had vomited into the drain began to expand. It quickly overflowed from the sink. It oozed from the restroom into the living room. CeCe grabbed a lamp and swung it at the substance. Then she dug out the stun baton her dad had given her. The little electricity it produced couldn't stop the creature from expanding. The elderly neighbor was awakened by the noise. He came out to inquire about what was happening. CeCe quickly pushed him back into his room. Then she dashed into the elevator. But the mysterious mass followed her in. It caused the elevator to stop midway. Just when CeCe felt utterly hopeless, Devin and Frankie finally arrived. They worked together to pull her out of the elevator. The next moment, the elevator shaft completely lost control and fell. All three broke out in a cold sweat. Once they calmed down, Devin began to question CeCe about why she had hidden her failure to get into the debate camp. What else could it be? Of course, it was because she didn't want to admit failure. She didn't want to be pitted by others.
You know, like for once, it feels like we're twins. You know, you've always been like the perfect twin, and I've always been the let's hope he turns it around twin. But you're a mess, just like me.
Devin's point was simple. No one can achieve perfection. The three of them took the subway together to leave. To their surprise, the enormous mass followed them. It was clearly targeting CeCe. She quickly ran out of the subway and noticed the high voltage signs in the tunnel. CeCe immediately jumped into the tunnel. She intentionally led the mass toward the high voltage area. Then she dodged a speeding train that came rushing by. CeCe and Devin took a cab back to the tunnel.
Hey, are you sure you're gonna be okay out here?
I'm not sure.
Okay, why don't you go ahead and give me 5 stars now before anything?
The three of them returned to uncover the truth, but they found Anthony leaving in a hurry.
Well, I have one wild guess. Your dad is behind everything.
Anthony examined the space at the end of the tunnel. He found that there is an additional device here. Compared to 30 years ago, he immediately dismantled it to inspect the internal structure, and found it was still connected to power. Anthony pressed a button, and saw a circular tunnel emerging not far away. It seemed to connect to a basement as well. Then a large burst of spores shot out. Fortunately, Anthony had the foresight to wear a full set of protective gear. He quickly shut the tunnel and left. Just then, he ran into the two kids. The twins mistakenly thought their dad was a mad scientist, and were too scared to go home to sleep. They stayed the night at Frankie's house. Devin told CeCe about Frankie almost killing Strick with his car. CeCe immediately thought of the day Helen almost hit someone while driving. At the time, she thought the other person was lying. Now it seemed Strick's car indeed had issues. Joe walked into the cafe and said Strick could talk now. He would be discharged this afternoon, so he hoped Frankie could stop by. Since his dad had come personally, Frankie felt embarrassed to refuse. At this moment, Helen finally gathered her courage, and told her mom that Strick's car was strange, as if it had a life of its own and could move by itself. Fortunately, Jenny had learned about the unknown species through Anthony. She didn't doubt her daughter. Instead, she reminded her to be cautious. All of this was likely related to the 1994 disappearance case. CeCe and the others quickly found Helen. They wanted to inquire more about the out-of-control car, but Helen had just been warned by her mom not to get involved in this dangerous matter, so she deliberately kept quiet, and claimed that day was just a misunderstanding. The car wasn't out of control. Frankie saw that there was nothing important happening here. She planned to go check on Strick, while Devin was wandering around the street. He was approached by a beautiful girl named Hannah. Devin quickly let his guard down. When Frankie saw Strick, she realized he had forgotten what happened after entering the basement. He only vaguely remembered something related to Anthony's freezer. Frankie immediately contacted Devin to express her desire to check out his basement. However, at this moment, Hannah was inviting Devin to the tunnel. After hesitating, he agreed to go find Frankie, but Hannah had disappeared. Since Anthony returned home last night, he had been showing signs of a severe cold. Anthony called the restaurant to order a chicken soup. Then he sneezed. He didn't notice the black liquid on the tissue. Meanwhile, Jenny arrived in the wilderness to dig up a box. It's important to add here that Jenny was actually Mitty's girlfriend before his accident. This box might be related to the missing case. Before long, Dino arrived with the takeout. He asked for a 25% tip. Anthony felt his pockets and realized he had forgotten his wallet. He asked Dino to come in and wait for a moment. The next second, Anthony sneezed and then froze in place, because he had accidentally popped out his own eyeball with the sneeze. Dino was terrified and ran away. Anthony quickly pressed his eyeball back into place, and carefully adjusted its position. This was quite an unusual situation. Anthony rushed into the basement, and rummaged through the protective gear he wore last night. He indeed found a hole in the cuff. The restaurant owner didn't believe his son's words. He came specifically to confirm Anthony's condition, but by this time, Anthony had already pressed his eyeball back in. Dino found it hard to explain his side of the story. The owner's wife immediately fired him. Anthony knew that his actions were underhanded, so he invited Dino to his house. He promised to clarify what had just happened.
I'm ready for an explanation.
What are you talking about?
What are you talking about? You told me to come here.
Anthony realized the situation was dire and urged Dino to run, but it was already too late. Anthony tied Dino up in the basement. However, his actions were being controlled by the spores.
No one must know of our existence until it's time. Then everyone will know us. Everyone will be us.
After saying this, Anthony vomited a stream of black liquid. He intended to pour it into Dino to assimilate him. Dino fought back desperately and broke Anthony's finger. At this moment, there was a knock on the door upstairs. Anthony snapped his finger back into place and sealed Dino's mouth shut. The visitor was Jenny, holding the box.
What is that?
It's a tape from that night at the fort. I took it. I hid it. I could never bring myself to watch it.
Anthony didn't expect her to hide evidence and deceive him for so many years, so he immediately kicked Jenny out. When he returned to the basement, Dino was gone. Anthony was about to survey the area when Dino suddenly rushed in to ambush him. He quickly subdued Dino and prepared to spit the slime into Dino's mouth. Unexpectedly, Strick knocked Anthony's head off with a stick.
I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry.
Devin rushed down when he heard the shout. He was almost scared to death. They quickly ran out of the basement and barricaded the door. Dino had spent the entire day with Anthony. He was sure that Anthony was parasitized by something. Then Dino noticed a tape on the table. He said it must be important since Jenny brought it. Frankie texted to call Helen over too. The group planned to find a place to play the tape, but Devin heard Hannah's voice in his ear. He decided to go find that girl first.
I think she might know something about the fort. That could actually help Dad. But I'm gonna meet up with you guys later, okay?
Just as they were leaving, the fake doctor arrived in the basement and took away Anthony's head. She brought the box to the lab and told Anthony, "Your body is in low-level contact with a contaminant. It is breaking down into a pool of nutrient sludge." The special device in the fake doctor's hand could accelerate this process. Anthony's body quickly transformed into a puddle of slime. Then it slithered into the sewer and returned to the tunnel. No matter where these substances were taken, they would always find their way home. This was also the reason why Strick's car was controlled and plunged into the water. The fake doctor explained, "I am not a bad person. I am trying to prevent the species in the tunnel from escaping. But Mitty's family never makes things easy." After saying this, she melted away Anthony's head. CeCe and her group arrived at the nursing home, where their grandmother lived. Only places like this had old projectors. The kids even pulled their grandmother to watch with them. They weren't worried about the content startling her. The film began with Anthony experimenting with plants. Anthony had a strong scientific spirit from a young age. He loved conducting experiments and recording videos. However, his father thought his youngest son was a freak. Only his brother Mitty understood him.
They're actually pretty cool. He's like a little scientist.
He makes videos of grass growing, Maddie. Who wants to watch that?
The Rue brothers were communicating on campus with cameras. Mitty suddenly stopped a girl to flirt with her. The girl was none other than Hannah. She looked exactly the same as she did 30 years ago. The tape suddenly jammed at this point. Devin found Hannah by the bench. He didn't understand why he trusted a stranger so much. Devin followed Hannah closely. Whenever Devin's consciousness briefly cleared, he would be enchanted by Hannah again. This was probably related to the spores he had inhaled earlier. Dino studied the issue for a while, and finally managed to restore the video. In the film, Mitty wanted to venture into the rumored nightmare camp for human experiments, and recorded the footage as part of his homework. So he invited Hannah to be the cinematographer, because this girl was a movie buff, and knew how to use the camera well. At first, Hannah refused to go on the adventure. Mitty had to chase after her and plead. His ex-girlfriend Jenny was very jealous. Mitty stated that they had broken up, and there was no chance of getting back together. Jenny didn't give up. She deliberately took Hannah's clothes from her locker, and carelessly tossed them onto the campus road. Mitty was extremely angry, but Jenny was oblivious. She insisted on going to nightmare camp for an adventure. Jenny didn't realize her actions were hurting Hannah. Mitty solemnly stated, "I won't invite you."
You know what, Maddie Brewer? I hope you die at Camp Nightmare. And your little friend too.
No wonder Jenny hadn't handed over the tape. She probably didn't want anyone to see the footage. Helen's perception of her mother shattered even more. The film continued to play. In the footage, Anthony was worried about his brother. He kept urging him not to go to nightmare camp, but teenage boys needed a test to prove themselves.
I need this. Okay, I'm not gonna be a big-time scientist like you. I don't have that kind of brain.
Anthony couldn't persuade his brother. Mitty still gathered his friends and Hannah to start the adventure.
For the rest of our lives, no matter what we do or don't do, we'll always have this.
Grandma suddenly shouted at this point, "Mitty, don't go in." The nurse heard the shout, and quickly took the elderly lady away. The young people continued to watch. The footage recorded the entire process of Mitty driving Anthony away, and accidentally opening the circular tunnel. After the black spores burst out, the camera shook. It was aimed at the unconscious Hannah. Fortunately, she regained consciousness shortly after, but the other three were nowhere to be found, and Hannah seemed to have entered a strange building. She held the camera and searched for her companions.
Oh God, what is that?
The three companions were trapped in black cocoons. At this moment, the sound of a door opening was heard. Hannah quickly hid in the shadows. The blurry camera seemed to have captured a monster. Hannah immediately grabbed the camera and ran away. The footage became increasingly unstable. Only strange sounds could be heard, confirming that Hannah was being chased by something. She screamed and ran frantically. Soon, Hannah was knocked down by the monster behind her. The camera fell to the ground as well. Then, a person in a protective suit walked over. It was hard to make out her features in the dim light. She was about to check if the camera was still working. Suddenly, shouts were heard from outside. The person in the protective suit quickly hid. It was Anthony and Jenny who had come looking, but only a few backpacks remained at the scene. Anthony couldn't understand what had happened. He decided to run out to call the police. Meanwhile, Jenny discovered the camera. That was the content of the entire tape. Strick suddenly spoke up after seeing this. He said, "During the time I was amnesiac, I was also trapped in those black cocoons. Although I have no clear memories, there are still some lingering sensations in my body." Anthony's abnormalities must be related to nightmare camp. Dino recognized that the last woman in the protective suit was the fake doctor from the hospital. Frankie sent a text to Devin, who had not shown up. He replied, "I'm going to nightmare camp." She quickly tried to call Devin, but the call didn't go through. Could Hannah be the ambiguous partner of her uncle from 30 years ago? They hurried to rescue Devin. At this moment, Hannah and the other person arrived at the seaside.
Devin, we have to jump. It's the only way to save your dad.
CeCe and the others arrived just in time.
I'm with Hannah, it's okay. She says we need to jump.
Devin, there's no one there!
CeCe quickly explained the situation with the tape. Hannah confessed that the reason he could see her was that the transformation had already begun in his body. After saying this, she let Devin go and jumped in herself. At this point, CeCe stated, "We need to return to the basement and have a good chat with that head." Strick had undergone a major transformation after dying once. He even took the initiative to apologize to Devin. As they talked, they arrived at their destination. The twins went in and saw that the head was already gone. They searched the house but found nothing. Devin immediately checked the surveillance at the door. He discovered that the fake doctor had taken the head away. At this point, Anthony had completely melted away. His entire body was sealed in a black cocoon like amber. It looked just like Mitty from back then. After returning home, Devin dug out his father's graduation album. The Hannah in it looked exactly like the girl he had just seen. If everything that happened before was fake, how could he possibly know what Hannah looked like just from imagination? This situation was definitely not that simple. Devin felt that there was a strange connection between him and Hannah. He believed that the girl wasn't dead yet. At this moment, Strick found a video. After the missing person case back then, a talk show came to gather material. His dad Joe had even given an interview. The interviewer Dr. Lamona was the woman who took the head away. Helen found that there was no information about this doctor online. The only search result was a book written by a person suspected to be the doctor. Its title was Global Crisis Management. Unfortunately, it was already out of print and had no online version. CeCe, Helen, and Dino planned to search for this book. The other three headed to the hospital to inquire about the situation with Frankie's mom, who worked there. Whether the doctor was a real doctor or not, she had indeed been seen at the hospital. There might be some clues there. Just as they left, Anthony, in some form, returned to the basement, and he was trapped by an invisible barrier, unable to move an inch. Devin and the others had arrived at the hospital. They falsely claimed that Strick had some after effects, so they wanted to talk to his attending physician. Frankie's mom checked and found out that Strick's attending physician was actually a pediatric dermatologist. This was completely against hospital regulations. Her mom immediately made a call to verify. Only then did she learn that the doctor's credentials had been stolen last week. She had to report this to her superiors. Frankie said she wanted to take a look at the surveillance first. We can identify that fake doctor. The four of them reviewed the footage and saw Lamona get into a vehicle on a deserted road. They could clearly see the license plate number. Strick noted the number down and planned to go back to the repair shop to check the plate, since credit checks are required for repairs. The repair shop had that authority. The three quickly found Lamona's address. As they arrived nearby, they saw her vehicle pass by. Meanwhile, Jenny came to find Anthony. She found the door tightly shut with no response. The neighbor Joe said that a group of kids had driven away in Anthony's car this morning. Your daughter Helen was among them. Jenny immediately contacted the juvenile detention center to help track Helen's electronic ankle monitor. At this moment, her daughter and CeCe came to a library to search for out-of-print books. They successfully found Global Crisis Management, but the author's name was Avery, and he was a man. He just shared his surname with Lamona. He held a PhD from MIT and had achievements in epidemiology, molecular biology, as well as in disaster mitigation and crisis management. CeCe flipped to the last page and saw a photo of Avery with Lamona. It turned out they were father and daughter. CeCe and the others hurried to find Devon and regroup. Strick cut the chains binding Lamona at the door and led everyone inside. The warehouse was arranged to look like a home. Deeper inside was a private laboratory. Devon found his father's clothes in a trash can. Dino rushed over to tell him not to touch anything. Didn't you see it says biohazard on the trash can? Frankie said that CeCe had found something and urged everyone to come and take a look. Strick grabbed a box full of vials. At this moment, CeCe found Lamona's research journal. The first entry dated back to 1969. It frequently mentioned the Orion Project. Let's follow the journal back to 1969. The Orion Project was a covert operation. Participants weren't even allowed to reveal their names. They were referred to only by numerical designations. Avery and his daughter were among the researchers, and he was the head of the entire project. On this day, 5 researchers put on numbered protective suits and entered Nightmare Camp. To be precise, this place was called Genome Fortress. In 1968, a camp guide led students to tour the area. Suddenly, an extraterrestrial object appeared. He was then dragged into the deep sea by an unknown substance. Now, the place had been completely renovated. Apart from the researchers present, no one knew of the existence of this secret facility. After Lamona finished speaking, she activated a peculiar device. Then, a circular passageway emerged from the ground.
What on earth is down there? It's not from Earth.
Lamona led the way into the secret facility. Inside, it connected to a vast area. Above them hung an alien spaceship. This thing definitely didn't belong to Earth. Avery pulled back a white curtain in the corner, revealing a black cocoon-like object. Inside was the guide from Nightmare Camp, who was the first contact with this substance. Though he had been trapped for a year, he was still alive. Time flew by in the laboratory. In the blink of an eye, 6 months had passed. They tested the reaction of mice. After exposure to unknown substances, the infected mice showed significantly slowed brain activity. Their breathing rates decreased, and gradually lost their cognitive abilities. Their nervous systems also fell into paralysis. Eventually, the mice would be completely decomposed and trapped in the same cocoon-like substance. Avery and his daughter injected it with a newly developed serum. The black cocoon-like substance disappeared. The mouse regained its vitality. Their serum had actually succeeded. However, Avery's goal wasn't just to rescue the guide. He wanted to destroy that mothership, to prevent the alien substance from entering Earth's ecosystem. Although everyone disagreed with such a risky plan, Avery was determined. He donned his protective suit alone and entered the laboratory to operate. Avery activated the massive syringe mounted on the wall. The probe quickly pierced into the black mothership. Avery opened the valve to let the serum flow in. The black, flowing vessel quickly solidified. Everyone breathed a sigh of relief at the successful experiment. Suddenly, the guide in the cocoon moved his eyeballs. At night, Avery rushed to wake Lamona and urged his daughter to quickly put on her protective suit. The other researchers had already shown signs of infection and began to attack. It turned out that the organic spaceship wasn't dead after all. Instead, it had entered a rampaging state. Lamona escaped the underground laboratory with her father, but Avery suddenly stopped at the exit. He had shattered his face shield during their escape. Now he was likely infected. Avery forcefully closed the passage door and told his daughter to fulfill his dying wish. Lamona quickly returned to their residence and opened the safe. Inside was a letter left by Avery. He instructed his daughter to ensure that the spaceship was controlled. If that thing escaped the underground, humanity would face extinction. Thus, Lamona invested her entire early life into her father's will. At this moment, she had returned to the base. Lamona ordered several kids to put down their journals.
Is our dad in that room under the fort?
That's what happens once you're exposed. The ship draws you back to it.
That's what happened to me?
How did he get out?
With what's in there. After all these years, I perfected my father's formula.
Although the serum could save Anthony, returning underground was far too dangerous. Lamona was willing to help them out, but Anthony didn't have much time left. Everyone needed to hurry up. Everyone arrived at the nightmare camp. First, each person injected a serum.
What about the thing we saw in the video? There's something like crawling around down there.
I took care of it.
Lamona warned everyone that the serum's effect would only last for 1 hour. You must wake Anthony within this time limit, and when he wakes up, the spaceship will also awaken. If the protective effect of the serum fails, and you haven't escaped, then at least you need to be away from the main observation room. After Lamona finished speaking, she opened the hatch. The group entered the underground one by one. Because they had already been vaccinated, they didn't need to wear protective suits. This was quite puzzling, since the serum only lasts for an hour. Why not wear protective suits just in case? Just after everyone entered underground, Lamona unexpectedly closed the hatch. They could only go save Anthony first. In the main observation room, not only was there Anthony, but also the cocoons of Hannah and the others. CeCe first injected her dad with a dose. The black container indeed turned to powder. Although Anthony didn't wake up immediately, his breathing and heartbeat were normal. Before they could relax, the spaceship above them was awakened. They quickly helped Anthony leave the observation room. Meanwhile, Jenny retrieved her daughter's location information. At some point, her GPS had malfunctioned.
Well, maybe she's just underground somewhere, you know, like at a subway station.
Jenny immediately thought of the nightmare camp. Several children had gone missing along with Anthony. It was likely related to that place. Although Devon and the others had rescued Anthony, they were trapped underground by Lamona and couldn't escape. Fortunately, not long after, Anthony successfully woke up. He observed his brother through the protective glass. Mighty's appearance still lingers 30 years ago. Anthony wanted to wake his brother up, but the problem was that Lamona had only given him 1 dose of the new serum. Moreover, there was no water or food underground, and they might die here forever.
All right, look, guys, I know it feels like we're in a tough spot, but here's what we're going to do. Nope, I don't have it.
Anthony had only eaten for a few years, and he wasn't Doryman. How could he possibly know how to escape? Just as everyone was feeling lost, Strick suddenly remembered that after he damaged the transformer, he had accidentally opened the underground hatch. He had almost caused Devon's death. This meant that if they cut off the power supply to the equipment, the hatch would open automatically. That's why Lamona kept supplying power to this place. Strick had taken a few electrical engineering classes, so he had some knowledge in this area. He speculated that there should be a fuse box in the main observation room. However, the serum in everyone's body had long since expired. There was only one set of relatively intact protective suits in the basement. As the only adult, Anthony had to take on the responsibility.
Remember, as soon as I get the canister in,
Trey blows the power.
How we run like hell.
All right, go.
He activated the injector to prepare to connect to the large pressure tank containing the serum. The spaceship above initiated the attack first. Fortunately, Anthony quickly got up and secured the tank. This caused the spaceship to enter a temporary freeze state. The children hurried toward the exit. However, Anthony had to hold the disconnected connection to prevent the serum from breaking off. After everyone crawled out, they waited for news from Anthony. Unexpectedly, he not only appeared just in time, but also awakened 4 children from 30 years ago. It must have been the serum in the pressure tank.
Daddy?
That made it possible. Anyone who saw their ex who hasn't aged for 30 years would be scared to look like Jenny. Right. Of course, there are some oddballs in the world, like Devon, who now has the leisure to flirt with his uncle's romantic interest. This guy truly hasn't forgotten his original intentions. So much has happened in the 30 years. Anthony simply didn't know where to start.
So my kid brother's old now.
You know, I work out and eat well.
It's not working.
Maddie was very happy that his brother could become a botanist, fulfilling his childhood dream, and he now had a pair of healthy children. But Jenny found it much harder to accept, for teenagers who were presumed dead had inexplicably been resurrected. As a police officer, she had the obligation to report this matter. Anthony immediately stopped her. If she reported it to the government, Maddie and the others would be taken away and treated like guinea pigs for various experiments. He had finally found his brother and absolutely couldn't lose Maddie again. Moreover, the spaceship had not yet been destroyed. The priority was to address this threat first. The only person who knew what to do was Dr. Lamona. The two of them immediately headed to the doctor's residence. Unexpectedly, Lamona had just revived her father.
And I have been working on the 429 serum the entire time. It worked, that's how I brought you back.
What have you done?
I saved you.
Avery expelled a pool of slime and transformed into an alien monster, and it wasn't afraid of bullets. It began to frantically attack everyone. At this critical moment, Jenny quickly used the serum to eliminate the monster. The young people couldn't stay cooped up in the house, let alone the four who hadn't moved for 30 years. Although Anthony repeatedly stated that they couldn't just leave the house, Devin was still convinced by Maddie. To avoid drawing attention, he suggested that each person take a survivor out. They would take them for a walk.
I could go with Hannah. Or not, I could just, I don't have to go with him.
Devin's intentions were clear from afar, but this method was indeed safer for now. Everyone split up and took the four out for some fresh air. However, they sequentially transformed into monster forms. It seemed that once the infection time exceeds a certain limit, the body will completely mutate. Even injecting the serum won't restore them to their original state. Strick, who had a shorter infection time, didn't mutate, but was soon pinned in place by the monster. Devin quickly pulled Frankie away. He pulled down the roller door and trapped the monster and Strick. At the same time, Matty, who stayed at home, completely transformed into a monster. He scared CeCe and Helen back in fright. As they fled outside, they ran into Devin and Frankie. On the ground lay Dino's motorcycle, which meant he might have been captured by the alien monster. At this moment, for monsters were closing in, they completely surrounded the main characters. When Anthony and Jenny arrived at the scene, they only saw scattered clothes on the ground. Several children had already been sealed by black substance, and were being sucked back underground by the capsule. Anthony and Jenny rushed to Nightmare Camp to save them. Strange noises came from nearby. The next second, a monster charged at them. Jenny fired the serum and eliminated it. Anthony also dealt with one by holding the pressure tank. Fortunately, these alien beings weren't invincible. As long as they had weaknesses, they could be destroyed. But the serum on both of them was limited, so they could only lock the iron door to temporarily block the monsters. During Anthony's confinement, he felt a certain connection with the spaceship. Anthony believed that it was only protecting itself, and had no intention of harming anyone. Thus, Anthony boldly speculated that perhaps only by letting the spaceship leave could the children be saved. So he opened the entire hatch. The spaceship responded immediately, and quickly absorbed the monster branches, shooting into the sky. After a dazzling white light, Anthony saw his brother come over to say goodbye. He told his family not to worry. The spaceship would take all the infected away to where they needed to go. When Anthony regained consciousness, the spaceship had already left Earth. Several children had also been successfully rescued. Summer vacation was about to end, and Devin decided to stay in Brooklyn to finish his studies. Just as the story was about to reach a satisfying conclusion, Strick suddenly spat out a mouthful of slime. This season's story comes to an end here. Starring David, who played Ross in Friends. He is quite adept at playing such nerdy characters. The performances of the young actors are also quite engaging. Similar to the first season's format, it tells the story of several generations entangled with mysterious events. The story and production are even more interesting than last season. The 6th episode even pays homage to V/H/S. It reveals the mystery in a mockumentary style. Most of the focus is on building suspense, but in the end, the monster in the tunnel was just an alien that accidentally entered Earth, and had been imprisoned by scientists for 55 years. It infected humans only to find a way back home. The last 2 episodes filled in the gaps, and featured smooth monster battles. Overall, it's worth a look.